Well, as you know, I am Patricia Scotland. I'm the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth is made up of 56 countries, about 2.5, 2.6 billion people, 60% of whom are under the age of 30. But India, of course, is the largest member of our Commonwealth with almost 1.3, some people are saying almost 1.4 billion people. And the Commonwealth has been totally committed to raising the issues which affect us all in relation to climate change. And way back in 1989, the Commonwealth leaders met in Langkawi in Malaysia to look at this whole issue of the threat that climate change was posing. And back then, that's 3 years before the first COP, our Commonwealth family decided that climate posed an existential threat and set out in 1989 all the things that we should do, but also said that if we did not do them, we would be facing this crisis. Well, we now are at code red. And the Commonwealth has together been looking at how do we reverse the aberrant consequences of climate change. And right here in this farm is one of the ways which many in the Commonwealth feel that we can do it. We've been talking since I became Secretary General in 2016 in particular about whether there was a way of creating a more regenerative approach to climate change, a more sustainable approach to climate change, which would not just mitigate and adapt to what we're doing to the consequences of man's impact on our climate, but also could we reverse it? Because we know that if we don't, we are in for a great deal of difficulty. One of the opportunities we've had is to think about how we could make nature-based solutions. Do we need to continue with this monocultural, monocrop farming? Or is it not better for us to do multiple crop farming? If you like, going back to use some of the techniques which our forefathers used so successfully, looking at the indigenous population. Well, I know that from about 12 years ago, this farm has been trialing out many of the ideas and methodologies that many people within the Commonwealth thought could work, would work. But it had to be an economic model. If it's going to work, the world believes that we are now at what we've been calling code red. That means that the sea levels are rising. For many of our member states, that has a disastrous consequence. Of the 56 countries, 34 of them are small states, but 25 are small island states. And if you look at what's happening in the Pacific, in the Caribbean, and in the Indian Ocean, these islands are deeply threatened. Some of them fear within the next few years, if sea level continues to rise, they will disappear. But look at what's happening to all of our countries. The drought, the desertification, areas are getting larger and more pernicious. We have real issues in relation to feeding our population. The World Food Programme are talking about a ring of fire, and the countries who make up that ring of fire, many of them are within our Commonwealth. The level of desertification and drought is likely to go up, which means we're looking at millions and millions of people in our world facing starvation. And so there's a huge issue as to how we must now respond, but we have to respond rapidly. And so these nature-based solutions are critical. June in Kigali, when our leaders met, all of them, all of our countries committed themselves to delivering this charter on living lands. We had already got a blue charter for oceans, and we've got something called common sensing, which uses the climatic spatial data to help us better plan. But Living Lands was to take the 3 Rio conventions on biodiversity, on climate change and on drought, and saying, can we turn those 3 Rio conventions into practical, implementable things that ordinary men and women can do to make sure that we rebalance our planet, that we have these nature-based solutions. So it was a great joy to me to understand that everything we had been doing, thinking, planning, dreaming about was also a shared dream here in India. But people hadn't been just dreaming about it, they'd been doing it. And so I have come here to see for myself that this dream is not a dream, but it is a real possibility. And it's been a great delight. The multifaceted elements of farming. Most of our farms recently have gone to monocrops. Now, these monocrops have not actually benefited our land. What we know is that there is a greater diversity and wealth in cross-fertilization if many different crops are planted together. And if we allow these different trees and plants to work in a way that means that they each enrich the land, but they enrich each other. And what we've seen here is that in place. So you have 5 levels of development. And so if you go through this farm, you will see coconut trees coexisting with timber trees, coexisting with pepper, coexisting with nutmeg that you will see here. And all of this richness, this cross-diversity, really enhances not only the quality of the plants and the fruit, but it enables them to grow. And I heard something very fascinating today about the impact on weeds. The fact that over these 7 years, the weeds have turned into the doctor of the soil, so that new weeds grow up, which really indicate the deficiency of the soil. And that when they die down, new weeds come. But there are virtually no weeds in this farm. And that must be because the weeds have done their job. They have provided the nutriments which the land needed. Now, that's something new that I had not heard before, but I learnt today, and it makes sense. So it's been a fascinating visit.